Hello, hello, ready? Right, ready, cool. Right, since everyone is here, so yeah, welcome to round 4 of NUDC 2024. Yay! Congratulations for making it this far. I hope that day 2 will be more fun. Hi, my name is Arya. I will be chairing you guys in this particular round. Before anything else, I would like to give the floor to my N1 and my trainee to give them introductions. So start with GADJAH.
Hello everyone, my name is GADJAH. You can call me GADJAH. I'm from Shakwala University.
Hello everyone, my name is Nabila. I'm from University Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm Fajrin from Universitas Pendidikan Muhammadiyah Sorong. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Nur Sakina from Nuku University, Maluku Utara.
Right, so everyone is here, everyone is introduction. So a few housekeeping rules before we start. Firstly, obviously, because this is a BP, this means that your time limit is 7:20 in this particular competition. Please be mindful of your time. There's an LO over there. If you need time, please don't do time yourself. It's prohibited on this particular competition. So yeah, please be mindful of your time. Anything above 7:20 will not going to be counted in the adjudication. Secondly, obviously, because this is NUDC, I want you to be super careful on your equity. Like, please be equitable not only during your speech, but also your gesture during your opponent's speech, etc. Thirdly, for the speaker, we are welcome you to state your POI preference and your gender pronouns if you have any. Highly encouraged to do POI though. Promise me I will take that account to the adjudication. And yeah, and the other debaters who are not doing the speech, please be respectful and comply each other preferences. Cool. Without any further ado, to open up the case of government bench, I call the Prime Minister. Here. Sorry, PM, is that your own device?
No.
Oh, cool, great.
Death is a part of our life. It's a part of all of us life, right? It is within our nature as being to be born, to live, and eventually die. Not only that this is unavoidable, but to try to go against it will be harmful for human beings. I'm going to talk about that in my case. But before that, 2 points of setup, right? First, how anti-senescence actually look like. Firstly, we want to draw a line between anti-senescence and the narrative of staying healthy or being healthy, right? I think it's different, and I think staying healthy can still exist in our side, because staying healthy means you want to, to be fit, you want to live your life at a maximum capacity, for example. This is usually expressed by the narrative of having enough sleep, having a routine medical checkup, drink healthy food, for example, right? This can exist in our side. On the other side then, I think what opposition has to defend is the narrative of anti-senescence, where there is an extreme way of looking young and become aesthetically pleasing as long as possible. They care less about being healthy, because a lot of these procedures actually is harmful for your body. For example, you attack people's insecurity, and that it's bad to have natural wrinkles, for example, or to have stretch marks, for example. I think this is a world where opposition has to defend. But second then, how the obsessions actually looks like and manifest in our side. I think the obsession looks like, the popularity of products that say, oh, this is anti-aging, or, having salmon DNA for your skincare, for example. I think also the discussion that shame each other when they have wrinkles, saying that, oh, this is bad, you should try this product, or you should try this medical procedure, for example, right? I think in our side, we don't want this narrative to exist. Instead, we want people to accept that being old is something that is natural and beautiful on itself, and it's okay for you to, be old. I think opposition cannot argue that but lastly, last point of setup, I think opposition cannot argue that this research will be successful, because I think in the status quo there is nothing but a mimicry of not looking old, but you're old inside and you feel pain in your body because there are multiple different Botox in your skin that is melting, for example, right? I think it's a placebo effect at best in their side, and I think this is the kind of role that they have to defend. They cannot argue that, oh, this will be successful or people are benefited for this, because insofar that we look at the status quo, this is nothing but harmful for the people, especially for those women who are up into this kind of narrative and being exploited by this kind of narrative, right? So I'm going to talk about one thing. I'm going to talk about why this is going to be dangerous for human being, right? Let's talk about a few things here. First, I'm going to talk about people who are actually able to afford expensive procedures or of anti-senescence, right? I think the problem with this is that the kind of medical procedure is not something that is guaranteed or successful to begin with, right? I think, i.e., it looks like Botox in the status quo that melt in your skin after 2 or 3 years after the procedures, right? I think there is no scientifically successful procedures or research that explain how a certain procedure actually good and prevent you from being old, right? But second, let's talk about those who cannot actually afford this, right? What are the alternatives for those who cannot afford expensive procedures or expensive consultation, right? I think they have to. I think majorly they opt into some kind of superstitious, normative kind of procedures. This is like going to shaman, for example, having like water that is, I think, believed as a holy water, for example, or to extreme cases, people actually drink blood or eat placenta, for example, to stop you being old, for example. Right? I think this is extremely dangerous because it's not only that it's harmful for your body, you opt into something that is just exploitative to you at best, and people are being benefited for this without any substantial benefit to yourself. But lastly, I think this also fits with the insecurity of people. How does this look like, right? I think you're scared of hairline reduction, for example, or that you scared having a wrinkle, for example. I think this built a generation that are scared of getting old and and scared of death, right? I think that's especially true for women, right? I think because women are most likely those who are, being the object of aesthetic, they have this obligation to stay beautiful or to stay pretty, for example, and therefore they are willingly, because they're pressured by society, to pay for expensive procedures, to pay for expensive products that do not have any guaranteed benefit to them, preventing them from being old, for example. They are chained by the idea that if you're ugly, if you're old, that you're not as good as when you're young, for example. And I think this is an exploitation on itself towards us, especially to those women who has become the object of beauty and supposed to be always aesthetically pleasing, right? Yes.
So, do you want to remove anti-senescence technology on your side?
I think if that's the world that we have to defend, yes, sure, because I don't think it's beneficial at all. I think we have technology to make people, we will have research and technology to make people healthy, to prevent people from getting cancer, to make people have, to be able to live their life at a maximum capacity, but we don't know, we don't want to make these people have to go to extreme dangerous procedures. We don't think this is good. We don't think this is going to be beneficial for them whatsoever, right? And then that's your burden to defend. Importance then. Why is this important? Because of two things, right? First, I think this is a method by companies or business to capitalize on humans' insecurity, so they actually buy their product, right? How does this look like? Right? I think they try to market this or to advertise this as something that's going to be beneficial, that you don't have, you shouldn't look old, that you shouldn't have wrinkles, that you shouldn't have stretch mark, for example, or you should always have black hair, for example, right? I think this is just the way for elitists and companies to actually have money, to actually have profit by feeding these insecurities, by perpetuating these insecurities to begin with for a lot of people in our society, right? I don't think this is good because this is not benefiting anyone, and it's just the elitists who keep on getting money from this. But second, it shifts the narrative that you should put beauty and aesthetic as the #1 priority as opposed to your health, because a lot of these women care less about their health. For example, a lot of these people care less about their health by consuming like weird medicine, for example, or opt into very cheap procedure that they're not sure about it just because they want to look pretty and they want to look young. We don't necessarily think about how it's going to affect their health. I think this is dangerous because they care less now about their health and care more about this this narrative that you should always look beautiful and firm, for example. And then the comparative is simple, right? And OG, we're able to make human focus more on health because we're gonna accentuate the narrative of being healthy as opposed to you shouldn't get old. I think this is okay for you to get old as long as you become healthy, as long as you become fit, for example. And then it's something that's better in our side. And then there are more incentive to research and about disease-related medicine, for example, because there are more demand as comes to this narrative. We are so proud to propose.
All right, I thank the Prime Minister for the very fine speech. To open up the case of opening opposition, I call leader up. Here.
Alright, so starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Chair, panels, and trainees, life is something we should value through doing things that makes us grateful for our existence, right? We value the virtue on setting your own timeline or even the time of beauty, privilege, and based on your timeline, your own life conditions, your own beauty conditions, the way you want to uphold the value of sustainable life or sustainable beauty for to uphold the value of your life. So will bring to you. First, I'm going to give a huge clarifications on why and telling you on the rebuttals about why the OG case is really irrelevant in this case. First, let me clarify to you. What we want here is simple. We're okay with this kind of obsessions. We don't mean this kind of obsessions and we glorify it, but it kind of we okay for people to do obsessions and have the way to a mechanism for them to do or even to strive more to get what they want in terms of this kind of anti-senescence. Or I'm going to clarify something on the issue about anti-senescence that don't make people being. We believe that in our case, anti-senescence don't make people being immortal. Right? That's what we got from the OG. OG think that the way we make these obsessions, it means that we want for a human to be immortal. So 3 layers of things that I'm going to clarify in this case. First, it will give, in fact, on our side, it's giving more opportunity for people to fulfill their own standard. In fact, you can it gives a sense of hope for the people for them to find that there's, for them to have their own standard, personal. So even in our case, feeling sick, governments glorify this and happening in all. We believe that this kind of health, personal health, is not. We believe that all our here happening in irrelevant. And we believe that this could be the probability, at least on our side, could be the sense of hope that makes people to have a last resort for them to make their kind of, have the beauty standard in the first place, so that you have this kind of, to make for them to less insecurity of having this kind of hope in the betterment for them. And lastly, to the major case or rebuttals about insecurity and why it's not relevant in this debate. First layer on why, yes, we believe that this exists in the status quo, in fact, right now in the status quo, but it's inexclusive in the first way, OG, because without this kind of motions, people are trying to be better and insecure in their own way, because the gap and the standard is really huge in the status quo. Second, why this is really out of debate, because for major reasons, which is it depends on the people to deal with insecurity, just like I've told you, right? It means that it depends. You cannot just give the consent, or you cannot just educate people out of the way if they are feeling insecure because it's depending on their own trauma, or even something that you cannot rely, or something you cannot decide for them, right? So this really really out of debate. And lastly, even if I bite the bullet, it makes insecurity. Okay, let me tell you 2 reasons. First, it doesn't relevant of being healthy again, because people in status quo actually prioritize to be healthy, for example, like having sugar detox, to look young in the same time and even being healthy in the same time. So even effective on our side again, because it gains the betterment for them too, internally and externally. Second, on the research and development, the better side, no, it actually happened on our side even better, because the moment we give this kind of people something that they have to have the kind of hope, later on the research and development will always continue and have the betterment improving in the status quo, because that's what we need. So I'm going to tell you on why in the principle level, our case, the lifespan is a justified choice and of giving it betterment. On how the urgency, let's see here. Time is something irreplaceable and cruel, right? You may have all the time in life, but if you're getting really getting the opportunity to redeem your fault, for example, in terms of beauty privilege and something, change your perspective in life, it might be that might be wasteful or something that really helpful. The thing is, it's not everyone born in the same starting point. That's the first. For example, like not having the privilege or even have the genetic privilege even out. And second, they don't. Not everyone born to have a better life. And luckily, having their moment to spend their life and their own without insecurity, without for being differentiated, especially the previous generations who actually have to strive work and is change the beauty standard or change their personal look because of their, for example, like they have to strive more in the field and something else. So therefore, this kind of obsession is really justified under three structural layers. First, it's still based on the consent and supported by the desire to have the time that cannot be redo because of that previous or particular reasons, right? So I'm going to preempt if the government's thing is relational to in the first place, it will actually less likely to be happen because it comes from the grief of the people and the personal grief that they want, and actually it came with the self-betterment in the first place. So at least on our side, the grief, people could channel it to be having the betterment in the aftermath. Second reasons on obsession doesn't mean a straightforward to idealize and have it immediately, right? It might take cost, money, or effort, just like OG told you. But we believe that in this kind of situations, it was more likely they have the the moment they have the capability to do so, they have more time to think again, right? Because they want to strive about it again. And we believe that this kind of, the moment they strive, actually they have more time to think about it. So it will not be rational, irrationality will not, less likely to be exist on our side. And lastly, the third is the time they spend with less satisfactions that will actually the harm of opening the government side. We characterize as something not for themselves, right? They have to be selfless sometimes, especially women. Women have to be selfless, actually for especially the mother, the moment they are being pregnant or they have having pregnancy, it changed their look, which means they are being selfless. This could be the only solutions for them not being selfish or in the first place, or they have to do kind of redemptions for their own. So what the exclusive aftermath to close my debate? First, if I bite the bullet, that the people waste their time and think they can redeem it in the first place, which is actually, it could be the waste opportunity in our side of waste investment, which actually, first, it is less likely to be happen because the effort that it requires makes the one who are able to do so is the one who is really sure of their decisions and the one with a huge grief and need to redeem themselves, right? For example, like if they preferably are doing something good, or they are the perpetrator, they are the one who doing something kind of discriminations towards other people, later on by this kind of opportunity, they can tell you that how bad it is. They can actually can be the face of telling them, even if it's not that only always sunshine and rainbow in the first place, even after you doing this kind of anti-senescence, we don't actually complicit towards the grievances and the urge of the people. And I believe that that's why OO should be on the upper hand. I raise my case.
Right, I thank the leader of opposition for their very fine speech. To continue the case, I call the Deputy Prime Minister. Here.
Tes.
human wants to live a healthy and good life on our side of the house because, yeah, we have family, for example. We want to feel happy and want to have, like, you know, a long-term sense of belonging with our family, so we don't want to die early, for example. That's why we prevent cancer by eating healthy food and so on and so forth. Or we have dreams or achievements that we want to achieve, so we want to have a longer lifespan without necessarily, you know, doing Botox and so on and so forth. So we think the narrative is not necessary at all under opening government because humans have so many other, you know, so many other counterfactual or like counter cause and analysis benefit to, you know, make human wants to live a healthy and good life on their side of the house. But what is the delta with the narrative under opposition bench? Your narrative stop on the healthy metric but operate by attacking natural biological process of human, which is to, you know, to always look young, for example, to always, you know, live, to always not die, for example, because you want to keep on lingering to, you know, expanding those lifespan under your side of the house with this anti-senescence narrative. This steps away this natural inherent biological process that's no longer in the metric of being healthy, but more on a narrative of being immortal under your side of the house, right? That is not refundable. This is the delta that you need to consider under your side of the house, right? People wouldn't have the obsession to begin with if this narrative of anti-senescence do not exist to begin with, and that's exactly why we regret the narrative under opening government, right? What is the winning metric in this debate? Firstly, whether having the narrative of human senescence is in line with the nature of being a human being. This is a principle and philosophical importance on how the anti-senescence is not in line with human nature. If we prove this by principle, regardless of the implications that opposition bench wants to bring or closing government wants to bring, they cannot win. Human is a degenerative being. We are alive, so we could die. We are young, so we are getting old, for example. That's what differentiates human with other non-life being like rocks or dust, for example. To some extent, even rocks are gonna crush itself over time it exists, for example. The question then becomes, who are you as opposition bench to dictate that humans should or should not extend their lifespan by eating healthy supplement, by eating, you know, Ponzi schemes healthy supplements, for example? Who are you to dictate that women should, you know, keep their useful by doing Botox under yourself of the house and this anti-senescence narrative, for example, when those things are not within our control as a human being? It is given by deities or God or any other omniscience potent being that we cannot control. Because since the metric of anti-senescence is to go against the nature of arbitrary component of being alive, so that's why under their side they cannot guarantee success. But what they do is they mimic the success of extending lifespan through marketing procedures like that is, you know, very invasive towards human body, such as Botox, like adding, you know, I don't know, chemical to your face that eventually will melt. So when you want to have this sustainable, useful under your side of the house, you force women to keep buying for Botox for the rest of their life, for example, so that the Botox don't melt under the side of the house. So or like injections of salmon DNA, for example. But moreover, those people who cannot afford those like expensive procedures will like what my prime minister said to you, they go to shamans like drinking blood, like holy water and so on and so forth. This is the harm that is exists under their side of the house. This is principally not justified because it's no longer about health. You can go healthy but have wrinkles. Under closing opposition, I answered the POI. What they want is women need to be healthy but also you cannot have wrinkles, you cannot have stretch mark, Botox. So that's why they push women to have Botox, creating a standard that perpetuates beauty standard. I think this engages to all of the substantives coming from opposition bench. Now, let's move on to another winning metric. Secondly, whether or not the implications is harmful for human generation to exist. Because we know, we already give to you that there is no urgency to have this anti-senescence narrative. So when we prove to you that the implications is bad, their urgency non-existent, so we win this debate. Notice how my prime minister specified the actor as woman. I'm just gonna go back to the principle of she economy. Why women and old people, old women, for example, are the most important vulnerable actor. Notice that anti-senescence capitalize on the aesthetic, on the visual, visual view of a human being, right? In their physique. So of course, the one most vulnerable important actor is women, who are the object of expectation to always look young for the for the male gaze, to appease the male, for example, and so on and so forth, or to live longer to cater for their children, for example. So that's why the demography of who buys Botox or who buys SK2, for example, or who buys those like beauty procedures that is very invasive are most of the times are 90% women, right? So that's why we think this like anti-senescence narrative only capitalizes the insecurity of this vulnerable actor, perpetuates what's happened, what's been the issue that we're fighting as, for example, like beauty standards and so on and so forth, right? But even people who fall for like malpractices of like drinking blood or holy water are women, are not only just women, but poor old women, for example, who are afraid of being sidelined by society when they go old, for example. That's why rich grandma go for Botox, but poor grandma got allergy out of malpractice. This is very harmful because firstly, you forcefully strip people out of their capital resources for something that's not guarantee success under their side of the house. You perpetuate people's insecurity that hit people's vulnerable state that prevents them to think rationally in decision making. Notice that this is a very important metric. You cannot just suddenly, yeah, people will still go rational, people will still have a good decision making. No, because you attack their insecurity. You attack something that is something that's been expectations of their whole life as a woman, for example. That's why these people are most vulnerable under our side of the house. I think this engages with any of the importance or urgency or importance or urgency that the opposition bench would bring in this debate. How are then we better we are better compared to opposition bench? We think there is no fiat that we need to like defend a good kind of like anti-senescence narrative, because we told you that without anti-senescence, people can still like alive, people can still want to thrive healthy and so on and so forth. But secondly, when there is no urgency under the side of the house, the sole existence of bad implications that's currently happening right now under the sheer economy of like Botox and skincare, for example, and so on and so forth, or people go for like malpractices and so on and so forth, are already a bad implications that we cannot have under the side of the house. But although we specified the actor as woman, but eventually at the end of the day, this like standard and this anti-narrative will trickles down to general society at the end of the day. So closing cannot suddenly come into debate and shift the actor like it's not about woman or it's not about like general people and so on and so forth, because eventually our logic still stands regardless of the actor. Very proud to propose.
All right, I'd like to thank Deputy Prime Minister for the very fine speech. To close up the opening half of the debate, I call the Deputy Leader of Opposition. Yeah.
Yes. What OG basically tells you is that your dream of wanting to make yourself good is destructive and unacceptable. Therefore, your existence will be regretted because that's your desire should be regretted at all, because that is destructive and that is harmful for your own being. OG do not know the pain of losing yourself over time, the feeling of not having the opportunity to even to have the time together with your family, because death come without expectation, death come without anticipation, death come at a random time, and that's the opportunity that OG overlook. You do not know the pain of not having the time or not having the longest opportunity for us to even do or to satisfy ourselves to the best. OO is simple. We want to defend and comply to what the people's desire. Like, we understand that in life we do not get the best of our times, and even in times we lose over our times. Even that we lose our times and we do not get the satisfaction before we receive the death. This might be the only opportunity for us to get the best of ourselves, and OO, even if OO want to trade off humanity, we are ready to trade it off in order for us to be satisfied. There are three principal responses to what the OG is talking, right? First of all, the only thing that is problematic under OG is that why people think the same way as them. Yes, death is part of ourselves, and there is an extreme way to change ourselves. That is destructive and that all. But I think if we take that logic, then there is no necessity to regret this motion, because people will organically reject this field in the status quo anyway, right? Comparatively, I think I will explain to you that in this dark world, that the fact that people still engage themselves to this narrative, that people still think that this field is still relevant, that still people can benefit and utilize this kind of narrative because they do not have all the times in the world. No, thank you. All the time in the world, we don't think that these vulnerable actors could not be neglected. But second of all, I think it's not up to OG to decide what is harmful or not. If women want to be pretty, there's nothing wrong with it. If people want to be immortal, then if they love their families and want to be immortal to prolong their life, there is nothing wrong with it. If me want to live longer and be aesthetic and even in training of my humanity, I don't think that there's a problem in it, right? There is no pride and there is no practical advantage to even defend my humanity when my life is miserable in status quo. So even if that is destructive, even if it's harmful, the counter-narrative, the counterfactual does not stand for humanity under said OG. But third of all, even if it's malpractice, even if it destroy ourselves, in the end of the day, the counter-narrative that the OG have to defend tells you why status quo is okay, why forcing yourself to eat healthy, for example, or to forcing yourself to accept death, even if you do not want that, is acceptable under the house, even if you regret that, even if you do not have the time to to realize your satisfaction as a human being. But going to the principle then, if OG want to talk about principle, then I think it's also fair for OO to also put on the table on the principle on why we think this is still a human thing to do. In principle, we do not think that this is artificial because it still connects and to produce by the human's mind and desire. Organic principle interest to every single thing that we do as a human is to make ourselves look good. This comes from the nature survival instinct for us to make our life looks good and for us to survive even until at some point in the future, right? This interest exists long before the field is established. When people just want their life to be good, then when there's nothing wrong with it, right? I think what OG and what the government bench will do is to blame people for having the obsession for wanting to live good or to wanting to realize their own desires, right? I think these examples like searching for the cure of cancer or even as simple as eating healthy and good foods cannot be dissected or cannot be differentiated under gov bench because that realize under the same principle that I just simply want to live good. There's just different mechanization for me to achieve that, but it does that stands along that stands with the same principle, the same interest that I want to live good and I want to live my life to the fullest, and so whatever that I want to do, there's nothing wrong with it. But there are two comparative, right, in this case. First of all, throughout decades, it's our natural instinct to survive and to live good. But second of all, we have to consider that even if we are always trying to reach the peak of morality, our ideals of wanting to our ideals, that we are never going to let go of our regrettable behaviors. We are a destructive behavior. Human beings are destructive. We are, and we could not overlook that when that features are highly interacted, are highly integrated to what humans should be in the current status quo. There is no need to regret this existence of anti-senescence itself, but the interest and the desire behind that incentivize them to do this kind of fields or to even engage themselves to this field should be characterized or should be analyzed by all the governing bench. OO argue that is totally fine. It still complies to our natural instinct and our interest to just simply want to live good, and that's why it's still not regrettable in principle. Going to the second exchange in the practical context, like why we argue in practical, and two things why we think we are still better. But before that, I from Cozy.
Are you okay with old people constantly chasing young instead of doing baseline healthy habits like morning walks and stuff like that?
I'll explain that in my case. And it's exchange in context and the practical context. I think there's two contexts that OG and both CG have to realize. First, OG have to realize that not everyone is being born in the situation that they live in, right? Not everyone live in the features that they prefer. Not everyone is satisfied to look old or to look with the specific features that they have in current status quo, which principally unfair when we are born without the options. Our features that when we look old, it does not realize to the hardship or to the things that we do. We just simply look old because that's the law of the nature, which is unfair. Because no matter what we do, we will get old anyway, whether we like it or not, right? But second of all, when we spend most of our time to reach anything else, the satisfaction, most of our satisfactions comes in sacrifice. When we sacrifice our time to work, for example, we sacrifice our time with the family, we sacrifice other things like our features or our aesthetic purposes. We do not have time to use cosmetic products because we are so busy in working or in studying. The way here that OO offers is, first of all, OO offers the only golden opportunity that came with that when death came without anticipation, that death came without exception, that you could have, when you have prolonged time with this kind of narrative, in order people to, even if that to seek the options that they have to satisfy on, you could spend more time with your family by this, using this anti-aging, and yes, yes, I think that even if you are healthy, even if you're trying to eat good foods, you still are not, that doesn't prevent you from getting deaf, and that's the context that the government have to compare under their set. But second of all, any other perspective for people to reach aesthetic, for people to think that their interest and their dreams is to look aesthetic, and if that brings satisfaction, we do not regret that under OO side. Under that reasons, I think individual level of satisfaction should be impacted, and that's why we're proud to post. Thank you.
Right, I'd like to thank the Deputy Leader of our opposition for their very fine speech. To open up the case of closing bench, I call the member of government. Here.
Opposition team need to understand that it is no longer an option for you to actually taking this kind of medicines or even this kind of research, this kind of alternatives to look young anymore. It is not an option because the peer pressure coming from the society, precisely creating a new standard that growing old or even seeing people with, the old crinkles or stuff like that in their face is something that is harmful, is something that is actually shameful for the humanity itself, right? We think that the only way to actually rely into this motion is talking about how do we perceive other people, how do we can see old people as someone that is can still productive, doing their own, doing so many jogging or even doing any kind of thing that is actually productive under outside of the house. This is the first main option, or even the contributions coming from the CG, because CG will only explain about first how is the counterfactual that exists because people not obsessed with this kind of research by the end of the day, and the second, how is this thing is harmful basically because it is creating communally agreed, for example, creating a new norms that basically people want to adjust to into this kind of norms, right? So yeah, before that, several discussion or even several lackness that coming from the government team or even the opening bench into this debate. But before that, I will talk about two things in my speech. First, how is this kind of thing is basically how the humanities obsession is basically something that is harmful for the entire humanity. We're talking about the motions that is that the actor itself is very universal. So we're not basically talking only for women, for example, like the opening bench. We opt into the discussion that communally people agreed and creating the norms that is basically harmful at the end of the day, and how is the research ultimately should be productive under our side of the house, right? So first, I will talk about we have to actually differentiate what is needs, wants, and even the obsessions itself. In the past, people needs or even want to be healthy because this is kind of, because healthy means that you are associated with a lot of productivity, for example. You can actually climbing the wall or even you can actually fulfilling a lot of your basic necessities, even if you're grandma, right? But right now, what is kind of obsession driving us into is that first, even though you are productive enough, you are not pensioners, for example, you can still feel that you are not enough because you are seen as people that is, growing old, for example, or even having this kind of crinkles in this current status quo, right? Now this kind of obsession is creating two things basically. First, the illusion that this kind of standards of healthy is not enough, or even the objectivity of the people about the healthiness itself is shifted, by the way. But the second thing, I think that the reality of being healthy is about when you have in the past to actually fulfilling your physically or even mentally is shifted to more contributions or about how people perceive you are for having no wrinkles or even having no white hair or stuff like that is actually exists right now, right? So what absents nowadays under this kind of obsession is first the standardization that objective about how do we perceive the healthiness or even the benefits of productivity that can only exist to
the old people itself. I will prove two things. First, how's the harm that exists within this kind of obsession to this kind of research is basically outweighs a lot of benefits. If CEO want to talk about, yeah, this also brings healthy or to a lot of people. So first, it is an area. Why is this a problem that is actually become a harm? First, it is an unrealistic standards, right? That most of people possess because they are seeing someone that is basically unrealistic at first. For example, this obsession is created because you see that Sophia Lajuba at 50s is basically looks so young, for example. But what exactly the problem under this kind of obsession created by the whole communal people is basically first, not a lot of people can achieve this kind of solution. Or even second, there are a lot of privileged people that only can do a lot of treatments at the very first place, right? But this kind of thing is basically principally very harmful because first, in the obsession in terms of the humanity, when it cannot be accessible to a lot of people at first. But the second thing, I think that it is segmented a lot of people from what kind of parameters about how do we perceive the healthy itself, or even how do we perceive the productivity. Also, how do we can maintain this kind of health body at the very first place, right? So first, this kind of obsession also reject the idea of real health because even though you can fix your things alone or whatever, you can still be seen as people that not so empowered at the end of the day, right? So it is actually under this kind of humanist possession or even this kind of obsession, creating first the harm at how people see others, only basically seeing from the physical or even seeing from the appearance, which is we neglect right now. It actually help or even regressing the progressiveness that can actually occur right now in this humanity because there are so many social movements. So not regretting this kind of obsession, meaning that you are supporting this kind of regress in the humanity itself, right? But the second thing, I think that why we cannot support any kind of or all of research that is basically rebranding as innovation in terms of making people young at the very first place. First, we think that the parameter for the research to be thought as good is about first how the research is actually can be accessible to a lot of people, or it is basically very collectively having a benefit to a lot of people, not only the certain people, right? The research that can only be possessed under our side of the house is about the research that move within what is accessible to a lot of people. The discourse about how you can make younger, for example, or even healthier body, even though you are not young, for example. So this is what the main POI that asked by my by saying that do you want to look at the old people and saying that you have to actually getting a surgery or stuff like that. We think that what actually we prove is first we're providing a more solution for not actually gravitated for the instant process that fed up for this capitalism movement, for example, because this is something that is basically become a human nature because only this kind of obsession setting people drawbacks to become like, okay, I'm growing old, then I have to get my surgery or stuff like that at the end of the day. How is this better than the explanation coming from the OG then? Because first, OG only rely on the certain actor of the motion, which is the women itself. In fact, that there are so many progressiveness that happen in the current status quo. But the second thing, they never talk about what kind of norms that exist in a society, how people will perceive the other people, the old people that's still productive, for example, how this kind of thing shape humanities even worse, and how is this help or even regretting all of the progressiveness that we have right now in the status quo. But one last thing, I will talk about how the humanity principle, it should be something that is prioritized in this motion. We think that the principle of humanity itself is not about this, is neglected through this kind of obsession. Why? Because first, the collective consensus towards certain standards is what set up the norm. So first, it shaped the future. The future depends on how we see the norms right now, how we see the people right now growing old or whatever. This means that under the side of the house, people will only looking at someone for the physical appearance, for something that is basically you look young, you look productive, you can do everything, you can actually ruling the world or stuff like that. But under the side of the house, we have this kind of obsession. We see that this kind of thing is normal, but the second thing, we reject any kind of idea for unproductive research itself. Proud to propose. Thank you.
Right, I thank the member of government for the very fine speech. Great, opening up the case of closing opposition, I call member of up here.
Boleh pinjam timer ya? Okay. Thank you. POI will accept one from government bench, but prioritize opening if not then closing. Starting in 3, 2, oh, trigger warning contain a lot of sensitive content because it's obviously related to life and insecurity. So anything that I talk about was probably just for the sake of the debate. Starting in 3, 2, 1. I feel like government bench debating in a bad faith, i.e. tweaking the counterfactual to be unfair. You regret the humanity obsession, it does not mean that you will just directly remove the beauty standard and fear-mongering of that or the capitalistic notions that they all want to combat in their side. Because they do not explain how the way you are likely to change that, because this narrative is essential to maintain the social order. Because fear-mongering of that is necessary to say that your life is probably precious and you can spend time wisely by doing virtues in contrast to doing sins. Because this also supported by wide variety of social institutions like government, religious institutions who are incredibly powerful, and so does beauty standard as well in their state of house. Therefore, the insecurity still exists because they do not explain how the way they change that narrative. The problems are how the way people cope from that insecurity. Because I feel like the problems of side of government is that they never properly explain the method to combat this insecurity. Because opening government claim that the rich grandma can use Botox, the poor grandma can use nothing. This is what exactly exists in the government bench. Because when there is no obsessions of humanity life, then there is no incentive for everyone, for market especially, to provide accessibility to combat that. The rich grandma can use Botox in our side of the house, but the poor one can use Scarlet because now you have varieties of products that will appear on our side of the house to combat a specific insecurity. Therefore, the conclusion are government bench do not have any mechanism to escape insecurity, and they make it far more elitist and exclusive on their side of the house. But secondly, I want to point out that the counterfactual of narrative in their side is immoral, because if they accuse us that we gaslight people to access the technology, but at least we gaslight people to chase for hope in their life. Because in their side, you must disallow people to appreciate their life. If I feel insecure because of acne problems in my face, then obviously you will gaslight me, saying that no, it is fine, you look fine and handsome, even if I feel the immense pain in my body. Therefore, government bench disallow people to minimize pain, they normalize people as if it is okay when we are broken inside. I'll mainly talk about one important thing, which is related to combating pain. Any extensions, any contributions would be extremely contingent on this claim. Because what is the most certain pain that individual feels later? I feel like humans feels not insecurity or mental health issue. I know this is extremely unpopulist because not everyone eventually care about insecurity, or because they have strong mental capability, or because they already trained with higher confidence, or because they also got supporting system from community that say you can be yourself, you can embrace just the way you are. So all those things still exist. But therefore the part in the debate is not all about insecurity, but instead the real pain that humans feel, which is the disease. Because the disease that humans feel is important, because everyone can feel this irrespective of whether you are healthy or irrespective of whether you're strong or not, like influenza. But also there are a lot of externalities that we cannot control, like how the virus mutate and how the virus evolve. Therefore this is important, because the only way for us to currently combating disease and pain that we feel is just throughout antibiotic to kill the bacteria and so on. But you still need supplement to fix the collateral damage inside your body. You still need vitamins to reconstruct your organic cells. Therefore, when there's an external factor, when you already consume antibiotic that can damage your kidney, you can eventually become weak day by day. Therefore, when your immunity got weakened as a result of aging cell, because you also constantly consume antibiotic in a weekly or monthly basis, because there's also constant attack from virus who constantly evolve, and because there's also heavy physical and mental activities like debating, or because there's a natural process of aging that allows your immunity system to be prone to disease. Therefore, this is important, because the only way for you to combat that is by the anti-senescence technology, because this anti-senescence technology apparently strengthening your immunity. I'll take in the minute 5. This is important because most of the disease right now can only be cured when you strengthen your immunity. What does this look like? This looks like COVID-19, that can only be cured when you are injecting vaccines, or cancer that can only be cured when you have strong immunity. Only if you do not have any aging cells and broken cells that can be repaired on our side of the house. The method of stem cells to perpetuate regenerations of cell can also only be developed when we have obsessions toward our life, when we want to stay alive, because we want to enjoy the beauty of life. Therefore, this trickle down to the market as a whole, because now they have an initiative to make every products of anti-senescence technology become far more accessible, because there's a market competition that say, even if you want to produce medicine, for instance, then probably there are market segmentations for the medicine that is expensive, which is the patent, or the generic that is far more cheap to be far more accessible for everyone. The comparative when there is no anti-senescence technology on their side of the house is that the process of individuals when they want to cure the disease become much more painful because you must bearing with painful antibiotics and treatment without anti-senescence technology that can eventually strengthen your immunity. That is to say, you will have more potential to relapse your disease, to have the same pain again, or you will face the process of death or process the curing to be much more painful under the side of opening government. Therefore, all of this shows three things at least. One, in order for opening government benefit and closing government as well to run, to say, live a healthy life and lazy mitigations that they're talking about can run, they must make humans obsessed with life. This is because supply and demand analysis that we explained. Because in order for companies or government to make sure that their products functionize perfectly fine, companies and government must endorse the healthy habits under our side of the house. Absent this obsession, people will not care about healthy lifestyle because there's counterfactual that to defend is comfortable lifestyle, sleeping 24/7, eating junk food, constantly smoke like the friends of mine. Therefore, the government do not obviously want to combat because this is in line with people's demands on their side of the house. Opening.
Don't buy their straw man because what they do is explaining the benefit of being healthy that's not exclusive because we have dreams and family and the rest of the house. But they neglect the worst case scenario of women suffering that as what opening government explained to you.
Basic debate, this is what we call as lazy mitigations. Because in order for you to apparently feel there's an urgency for you to want to feel healthy, then obviously you need to be obsessed first with life. And this is all the prerequisite that we talk about that eventually occupy government case. But the second thing that I want to talk about is absent this obsession, people will not eventually care about health style. Because under our side, government does have an initiative to provide subsidy, supplement, social program, freelance for kids like the chosen president right now, because they consider that life is important and getting old is painful under our side of the house. Therefore, you must grow with the supportive echo chamber in order for you to support our life exclusively proven under closing oppositions. But thirdly, I feel like our case explain why the investment wouldn't be wasteful, because this is non-existent in the side of opening oppositions. Because we explain that this can trickle down to everything in people's life. This can trickle down to combating disease. This can also trickle down to manifesting the beauty standard. Because if you want to look pretty under our side of the house, then it's fine because it is your choice. Because not everyone eventually will want to feel pretty in either side. If you want to feel like you are satisfied with your experience this way you are, then obviously you can choose to not consume the anti-senescence technology. But thirdly, I feel like everything that side of government want to solve requires you to strengthening your immunity, requires the urgency for you to feel that life must be continued tomorrow. Therefore, our case proves that this is larger than anything because we can prove that there is an incentive for government, for people, and for society to change their policy and to change their communal building to be far more healthy and to be far more accessible for everyone. In the end, we all know that life is painful. We can go through it together without making it complex like government bans. Opposed.
Right, I thank member of opposition for their very fine speech. To close up the golf bench of the debate, I call the golf whip. Here.
We are not debating about whether anti-senescence in its most basic and inherent form is whether harmful or beneficial. We are not talking about the snake oil salesman phenomenon in a vacuum. We are not talking about whether trying to be young in its vacuum, most isolated form is good or bad. We are talking about humanity's obsession. We are talking about a collective and communal agreement that yes, our main goal is to be young, and youth itself is fetishized by the communal society to a point where it reach an idea where if you're not young, then you are not really, appreciated by anyone, basically. Before I go into any kind of rebuttal, before I go into any kind of extension, I would like to first cement our contribution in this debate when comparing into the opening government team, our opening counterpart. Here's the thing. Two main ideas that differentiates us and also creates a better and more relevant contribution in the government bench than the opening team. First is the idea of the actors in this debate. Second is the requisite analysis required for the opening team to run. First, the actor analysis. We're talking from the very first sentence that my first speaker brought to the table, we are talking about the collective and humanity as a whole is the actor. We are not simply focusing on certain atypical actors that are sure vulnerable, but we are talking about the communal understanding on this and why this is bad. That's the thing. If you talk about humanity, then you talk about it in its entirety. My first speaker talked about three main perceptions of others, perception of health in itself, and finally, the perception of research and what kind of research should benefit people. This three analysis, in its most entire form, proves to you judges that we're talking about humanity and how they perceive others in the parameters that young equals health, young equals good thing. This is precisely why the actors and relevancy to the motion is so much better on us. But moving on from that, the analysis that the opening government team brought to the table is the idea that people are more prone to predatory schemes made by people of the capitalist elite, for example. In order for this analysis to run, they need to prove why people would willingly and able to engage into this kind of glorification. When we're talking about glorification, we're talking about humanity. Again, the idea of perception and how we perceive others. Their idea and their analysis relies on the fact that people are selfly insecure about themselves in a vacuum, in isolation. However, we're talking about insecure communal level, not just old women using Botox, for example. Moving on from that, I will engage into the ideas brought to the by opposition team, both the opening and the closing government team. The opening opposition team brought an idea regarding the finite quantity of time and how do we actually self-actualize ourselves. They stated things like we are not born from the same basket, for example, we are not afforded the same privilege, for example. And finally, they talk about idea of agency and appreciation. You have agency to do whatever you want with your body, for example, and can only be afforded by glorifying this kind of thing and obsessing over this. First question, why must it be in the form of obsession? My first speaker is the only speaker that brought to you about the three main things that people consider when they're doing something. Needs, wants, and obsession. When we're talking about health and what do you actually do as a human, there are things that you consider as need. Again, my first speaker stated that in the past, people need to be healthy in order to be physically active, doing their things and stuff like that. And there are also wants and there are also obsessions. What differentiates this kind of thing is in the degree in which you fetishize this kind of thing. In their world, even if self-actualization does exist, the argument that my first speaker brought to the table regarding the idea that obsession is inherently self-harmful by virtue of it simply inaccessible and unachievable by people is enough to tackle every single thing that they brought regarding the argument on the finite quantity of time. Why so? Here's the thing. When we're talking about the finite quantity of time, it's afforded, you know, we don't know when is our death gonna come at the end of the day. We're not talking about death slowly marching to us. Death can come anytime. When we're talking about self-actualization, it's making the best of what you have right now. And in order for you to have that, as a society, as humanity, not just individuals in vacuum, you need to make sure that the society itself values you as a person from birth to death. This is precisely why my first speaker's argument regarding the perception of others in humanity, the perception of health, and the perception of research is so much more important. The perceptions of others will be so much better on our case because old people that are going old later, people that are going old are valued by the community, not just because they're young, but because they are a part of that community. Because now people are no longer obsessed with this kind of thing because we regret that kind of obsession. The world that we live in are inherently different than them, purely because in their world, young is the prerequisite of you being appreciated. Therefore, by level of perception of others, we are better. But also perception of health. You as an old person would just do baseline health activities with your grandchildren. I don't know, you go morning walks, you go morning jog as I POI'd before, for example. And this is so much more accessible and brought so much more benefit that are marginal, sure, but it also brought actualization to yourself. You look at your life and you enjoy it. That's much more achievable than in their world. Well, sure, people are obsessed with this kind of thing. People are given a sense of hope, but how can they achieve that hope? Their metric is achievability and they cannot prove that. Our metric is not accessibility, it's not achievability, it's your level of appreciation in society, and it's so much better by living in our world. But before that, go ahead with the POI.
If this perception of harms, why this is the perception of harm could be eliminated without anti-senescence under your side, when people could still attack you for being unhealthy and old under your side?
The attack will, even if there exists an attack, which is not a very likely thing to happen, here's the thing what we are going to prove to you. Your value is not determined by your youth, something that is inherently inaccessible and unachievable in its inherent form. Therefore, we managed to prove that question. Finally, the CO brought the idea that insecurity persists at all time. Here's the thing, judges, do keep this in mind. Our burden as the government team is not to remove any kind of insecurity, it's not to remove any kind of harms you feel, It's to provide a humanity that in its most ideal form, able to cater to the most amount of society as possible. Keep in mind again, that the actor in this motion is humanity as a whole, and the object is its obsession. By virtue of proving that by rejecting and regretting this obsession on a communal and collective level, we are able to provide a better society, we win in this debate. And we are able to win in this debate by providing a deeper and a more prerequisite analysis that have a bigger scale than the opening government team brought to the table, and also tackling down any argument that the opposition team brought, either the opening and the closing team. With that being said, we are proud to propose.
Right, I think the Kafet for a very fine speech. To close up the debate, I call the op-ed. Here.
Check. As usual, trigger warning, because I will talk about some sensitive contents that may offend someone, so just sorry in advance. Right. If I were to come from a family which has history of premature deaths runs through my family, I don't think it is fair from the government to tell me to just bear with it and do nothing. It is justified for me to be obsessed and to these projects such as Anti-senescence to ensure that the future of me can be prolonged and the humanity condition itself will be better off. 2 points of clarification. Firstly, I think the government bench is debating under really limited context, because anti-senescence is not just your average Botox, as the context slide implies. It aims to slow down or prevent the decline by stopping the aging cells itself. This includes, therefore, antibiotics or repairment of stem cells or vitamins, as Jose already told. So our context is more in line with the context slide. But secondly, this proof, our burden is going to show to you why, with the obsession of the anti-senescence, is going to provide the accessibility for everyone so that it will be democratized as and prove to you why it will not happen under the government side, just as their claim burden to be. Let's start with engaging with OG. Because they're talking about the likelihood of success will be very low. They say that this procedure is dangerous or already engaged. However, this is pretty much a deadlock. How does our case on curing disease break the deadlock on the opposition? 4 things. Firstly, the widespread context. I believe this is important because OG failed to understand is that people don't try to prolong their life without reason. They did it because of fear. Fear of death, fear that their family have the history of premature deaths, for example. While on OG, you just let people to be eaten away by fear. This is unfair because, as Jose already explained before, this is something that is dependent on the birth lottery, that some people may not be affected by this, but also the counterfactual that they are having is that you are going to gatekeep this because when there is no obsession, there is no demand. Therefore, there will be less research on this, less accessibility for poorer individuals. Therefore, the structural impact of this will be lower and lower. But secondly, the context on how cells heal and importance of immunity that Jose already explained. This is important because it is the prerequisite for you to having a fulfilled life that OG and to some extent CG wants, is to able to function, to be able to lari ringan, for example, and whatnot. The problem being, not every individual have the same cell capacity to recover through stem cell itself. This is especially affecting disenfranchised people such as women, minority, and poorer individuals. Therefore, the need for external stimulant to be existing and accessible is very important. Therefore, the prerequisite for you to be able to function, to be able to run and whatnot, is for you to have the antibiotics, have the vitamins and whatnot, which is only existing and accessible with the existence of human obsession in and of itself, which cannot be done under the government side. But thirdly, why the obsession ensured the quality in and of itself? This is true in 3 different ways. Firstly, because there is going to be market competition, which going to ensure the quality. If the brand itself does not provide you with quality products, they can shift to other products. Secondly, the existence of public scrutiny, such as rating and review or whatnot, ensure that the quality product will be accessible to everyone. And thirdly, the government intervention through regulation and whatnot, this will not be existing because insofar as there is no obsession, there is going to be less urgency for government to regulate, for market to expand, and for everyone to really care, therefore going to be less accessibility, less scrutiny in and of itself. But fourthly, the counterfactual that are offered under OG is that people will suffer more. This is important because there is 10,000 reasons for pain to happen, as Jose already explained. Humanity always try to stop it. This is happened due to our inherent fear of pain, which will be accommodated on our side, and that is why we expect advance as a species. What OG is trying to propose is inhuman under 2 sense, because one, that is not what humans normally do, but secondly, that is cruel to let some people to suffer because of pre-existing condition compared to our obsession that will trickle down to the general advance of the whole field. This is much better off. But before I move on, OG.
If your metric of overcoming death trauma is to exploit, like forcefully grandma to look young for like beauty standard, how is that not arbitrary and inaccessible under your side of the house? Like if there is no obsession, there is no harm under your side of the house.
I will engage this with the second point. Regarding insecurity/societal discourse, I will combine this because this is pretty much the contribution of the entire gov bench, both opening and closing. Because the stigma against old people or ageism predates the anti-senescence. This is something that is evolutionary, where you see people who are old as weak because they are unable to hunt or plant grains or whatnot. Therefore, the ancestor already normalized this view from the start. And even throughout history, it still remains. That is why Roman consul, for example, always elected in their 20s and 30s. American founding fathers, French revolutionary, almost all in their 20s. This is important because it exists from the start and so old that you cannot fight it, let alone as an individual. This is what the burden that the government bench is trying to push. So we face it now. Give the chance and accessibility for all. Because let's face it, without the obsession, the rich individuals would still have the accessibility, the access on this. Now we give the chance for the middle-low people to still have the access. This is important because one, the middle-low individual is most likely going to be the victim of the beauty standard because it is most tuned into the rich elites. And secondly, we managed to mechanize the harm and how to solve it. But even if you are not buying that, even if you are not buying the mechanism to solve it, Jose already explains that insecurity will be used to motivate people. For example, if you are seen as fat, for example, it will be pushed for you to run, for example. This is important because the prerequisite of CG's point about the other mechanism to run is for you to be empowered to fight against the stigma to begin with, which will only exist under CO. So the weighing is exactly with this obsession we normalize. We are able to remove the insecurity en masse because of the stigma that is unfair that you cannot fight as an individual. But lastly, to OO. Why CO above OO? Because one, we managed to mechanize the harm better about the context of the importance of this anti-senescence. Secondly, our scope of harm bigger rather than just beauty on their side. We're talking about the health and essential tools such as antibiotics and whatnot. And thirdly, their contribution on fulfilling life is contingent on how far-reaching the anti-senescence is, which only explained under the closing up.
All right, I think the opposition wait for the very fine speech. This marks the end of the debate. So yeah, you guys can just shake hands and wait outside because this is an open round. There will be an oral adjudication after this, so you guys can wait for like 15 to 20 minutes. And yeah, thank you.